This video is as much my thoughts on the concept of the Backrooms as it is an actual review of the film, and there are some spoilers here and there. I wanted to focus on what the Backrooms is, what it means, and what it does to the people who get trapped there, as we saw in this film. Now, Backrooms is directed by Kane Parsons and written by Will Sudik, and it's by no means the scariest movie you're ever going to watch, but what it does very well. It's a very effective psychological, trippy, surreal nightmare. And to me, that's what the world of the Backrooms has always conveyed. As we learn in this film, which I think is an excellent explanation and piece of lore and world building by Kane, is that the Backrooms is a place that remembers rooms, buildings, objects, places from our past, even people. It remembers them over and over, but like a copy of a copy of a copy, the memory begins to degrade, becomes distorted. It gradually becomes more obscure, abstract, random and unsettling. Objects like chairs, for example, can be too big, losing a sense of their original scale, and that can be very unnerving. Some objects can get half stuck inside a wall or the floor. The layout of rooms and hallways makes no logical sense. Structured geometry breaks down. The most disturbing aspect of the Backrooms is that there seems to be some kind of intentionality behind the surreal madness the characters encounter. Like, walking through the Backrooms is a journey into the crazed mind of a sick intelligence, and that's before we get into the entities that lurk in some of the dark corners of the Backrooms and prey upon the lost. Kane has managed to take a concept that began as a piece of internet lore, a creepypasta, a single image, and he's turned it into a compelling narrative with a deep mythology all of its own. His particular version of the Backrooms, which he developed on his YouTube channel, of course, has really been the widely accepted de facto canon for the genre, though some fans of the genre prefer the Backrooms without entities. But try making a horror film with characters just walking around empty hallways for 2 hours. Now, that might work for you, sitting at home in front of your computer, second screening to some deep, broody ambience videos while you study for college, or ASMRing yourself to sleep in bed, but it wouldn't work for a motion picture that requires a plot with actual conflict and a sense of danger, obviously. Though you can tell that the film isn't a massive budget production, it certainly never feels cheap, and certainly feels like it was made on a budget far larger than $10 million. So it's impressive what was achieved for so little. Main stars Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renata Reinsve put in some wonderful performances as Clark and his therapist Mary, and they really sell you the shock, confusion and disorientation of experiencing such a world. Also, the cinematography is phenomenal. Now, not to summarize the plot, which I often do, but I do want to focus really on the characters and how they experienced the world of the Backrooms. I was hoping that Clark was going to have some sort of redemption arc. For those of you who've seen the film, you know that that did not happen. He's a man with a drinking problem and a failed marriage and a failing furniture business. And he seeks therapy from Mary, who has her own fairly unresolved story arc, which was her traumatic childhood with her schizophrenic mother. And I felt that there was some threads there that weren't quite tied up in the movie. But the Backrooms as an environment of compartmentalization, of memory and remnants of the past, was a perfect place for Clark to lose himself in, even if his descent into madness is a little too quick for me. He fails to make sense of the Backrooms. Having gone in there night after night, he found an entrance, of course, in his furniture store. And discovering these distorted fragments of his past and a poor copy of his wife Barbara, and as Mary explains to him after he's taken her hostage, he's a man who seemingly cannot take responsibility for his life and blames everyone else for his failings. And in the Backrooms, Clark has found a place where he can become willingly, fully trapped in an arrested state of personal development. where he never has to take accountability, where he can avoid having to better himself and change. He doesn't need to change in such an environment because the Backrooms represents only the past and a misremembered, fragmented version of the past, in particular past trauma. And he can live in that loop, that never-ending cycle, where he can maintain the circular logic of blaming everyone else and everything else in the world for his own failures, without ever having to self-analyze. The Backrooms lets him wallow and escape personal responsibility because it is the literal manifestation, the embodiment of stagnation and past trauma. The environment literally copies a person's imperfect memories of their past traumas, storing them in its infinite halls, trapping them there. And I think the logic of how the Backrooms works is something that really resonates with me because I've always had very vivid and memorable dreams, and dreams filled with symbolism and common themes and environments. And my dreams have often been filled with very real meaning, as if my unconscious is trying to tell me something. And when I wake up, I can sort of analyze the imagery and the themes of that dream, which can be wonderfully therapeutic when you're trying to come up with solutions or overcome problems. And you know those dreams where you're in your house, but it's not your house, but you feel that it is. There's a knowing in the dream. You know that something is a certain thing, even though in the real world it wouldn't make any sense. Or perhaps you're walking through some liminal space and you're alone. And for me, that liminal space is usually the corridors of a hotel. It's a hotel that feels very familiar, like I've been there a long time ago, but in truth, I've never seen this hotel before in my life. And you know those dreams where things seem to make sense in the dream, but when you wake up, you realize how illogical they were, or dreams where faces are obscured in some way, details are off, and at first everything seems fine. But when you start to take notice of the inconsistencies, the dream starts to break down. And that's when characters in a dream can turn on you. And suddenly it turns into a nightmare, or you're being chased, for example. And Inception explored that a little bit. And I feel like the mechanics of how the Backrooms operates is very like the dream world. Some dreams can have vivid details, but they're seldom absolutely photorealistic, perfect recreations. The images and details are usually wrong because in the dream world, this simulated reality is being rendered in real time as you're experiencing it. So it lacks consistency. It's a little bit like generative AI in that way, right? There's a consistency problem in dreams. That's why when you read a book in a dream and then you look away and you look back at the book again, the letters have changed or the time on your wristwatch keeps changing. Now, we accept the wrongness of dreams during the dream state because our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is basically offline when we're sleeping, and dreams are emotionally driven. So the higher functioning parts of our brains are not operating. We accept anomalies when dreaming, anomalies we wouldn't accept if our brain's higher functions were still operating. So a good friend of yours might appear in your dream, but they may not actually look like the real person they're based on. But you feel like they are, and so they are, right, in the dream, and your mind just goes along with it. And the same is true for locations and objects in your dream. And if you were to actually be able to watch your dream back, like playing a video file that you could download from your brain, you'd be shocked at how many details were wrong. But you oddly didn't notice these inconsistencies, these anomalies while you were dreaming. So just to come back to the film itself, a straightforward zombie movie or monster movie or slasher movie does a certain type of creepy and a certain type of horror in a particular way, and that can be predictable, right? It's very formulaic. But psychological thrillers like Backrooms tap into something much more terrifying. Again, it comes back to those nightmares. And I think it's the notion that you don't really need an external threat to generate horror, because the horror can be within the person, forcing them to face the traumas they tried to bury and having those fears come to life in a literal physical setting. So you throw in the Backrooms maze-like illogical structure, but at the same time it feels familiar, but it's off, so that's very disconcerting. The eerily bright lit fluorescent corridors and a sense of isolation. You put all this together and you've got the ingredients for a very clever and quite unique horror story. I wasn't expecting Clark to get quite so messed up by the end, especially the confrontation at the dinner table and what happens there. Just got weirder and weirder. For those of you who've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I am curious to see where the Async storyline goes. I've been fascinated with this since Kane's early videos. The idea of a corporation or possibly a government-aligned agency, or even just a government agency, exploring and cataloguing the backrooms for all sorts of reasons, research or storage, or for resources, or for transportation across the world, right? Because if you find one entry point into the backrooms, you might find another entry point, another doorway that's on the other side of the world, for example. So that would provide nearly instant transport between two places on Earth. And maybe the backrooms has some kind of power source that the elites would love to get their hands on, right? And it all goes terribly wrong. Or the backroom's ability to replicate any object, well, that could certainly be incredibly valuable, right? Of course, powerful people would want to exploit the backrooms for their own gain, discover its secrets, discover some means of controlling the backrooms and enriching themselves in the process. So you could have this kind of Black Mesa type research outpost operating inside of it, which is, kind of like the Async Corporation in a way. And I could foresee a secret government intelligence program exploring it and investigating it, kind of similar to something like the Stargate Command military operation in Stargate. All of those things could give the Backrooms series a really compelling hook for future installments, whether that could be another movie or a TV show. Now, the Backrooms has plenty of scary moments. Again, I don't think it's the most scary film you're ever going to see, but certainly there's plenty of creepy there. I don't think it's an amazing film or anything. I think it's quite good. 7.5 out of 10 is how I would rate it. So worth watching. Definitely worth watching. And I'm interested to see more. The film stayed with me. I'm still thinking about it after watching it. After the credits roll, I'm still thinking about the movie. And I'm still, looking for answers and explanations for things. And that's a very good sign, I think. Kane brilliantly introduces the concept of the Backrooms to new audiences, while also managing to, I think, satisfy longtime Backrooms fans and maintain consistency with the lore that he's developed. The overall Backrooms story doesn't move forward too much. That's okay. There's huge potential now to explore it more and provide some answers to the mystery behind the Backrooms. Why does the place even exist? What's it for? Is there a purpose? Does it have any deeper meaning? And is there a central intelligence behind it? There's a phenomenal Backrooms short that Kane made almost 4 years ago now. It's called I Remember. And it always makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'd highly recommend you check it out. It's a monologue from someone or possibly something behind the Backrooms itself, which might provide some kind of cryptic metaphorical insight into what the place really is and what it's all about. That's going to do it for my review of Backrooms. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.